Hi everybody, welcome back. It's day 6 of the Priorities Reset. Today we're going to talk about time management. But first, before I dive into time management, I want to address a couple things regarding habit formation, which was yesterday's topic, or day 5's topic. So regarding habit formation, 2 things I wanted to mention. One, a lot of the material I talked about specifically around what constitutes the components of a new behavior, right? So the motivation, the ability, and the trigger, as well as linking the concept of linking the new behaviors with an existing behavior. Those are ideas that I gleaned from a great TEDx talk by a man named BJ Fogg. I'll include a link to that TED Talk in this week's notes, but just so you know, those are not my original thoughts and ideas around habit formation. Those are some really science-based, research-based views that he has come up with and developed over the course of his academic career. So there's that. And then the other piece that I wanted to mention real quick is sometimes building a new habit also involves deconstructing an old habit or an ingrained habit or an entrenched habit. And to the process of avoiding old habits or deconstructing old habits is a little bit different than building a new habit, but not completely. So the pain piece is still really important. So you have to understand why you want to not do that behavior anymore, or why you want to avoid and deconstruct that habit. So again, the motivation comes from being really clear on your why. And the more frustration or dissatisfaction or pain that comes from that negative habit or that habit you want to undo, the better. So get really clear on why it is that you don't like that behavior. That can be really hard sometimes, to critically analyze your habits, your behaviors, and to identify why they aren't serving you anymore. That can be really uncomfortable. So just know that in the beginning that the more you analyze them, the more you understand why you don't want to be doing that thing anymore, the easier it is to have the motivation to move past the impulses that come along with doing that habit or having that habit entrenched. So that's the why, right? And then a lot of times we have the ability to undo habits. It's not a lack of ability. It's a lack of oftentimes having appropriate substitutes or something to occupy your time when you normally might have been doing the thing that you're trying not to do. So whether that's screen time and having a limit or a cap on your screen time, or you're doing just a literal digital detox, like having a good book to read, having a walking route to go on, having a list of people to call that you have been maybe neglecting your communication with over the last months or years or whatever. So having a group of things, a list of things, or a very specific alternative habit to put in place of that old habit is really critical. There's classic examples of, quitting smoking and chewing gum as an alternative, or chewing on, because a lot of that is an oral fixation, right? So chewing on a toothpick, or those are 2 positive new habits to replace with smoking tobacco. For me, for a long time, I enjoyed coming home and having a glass of wine after work. And then when I left the pseudo-corporate world, higher education, not corporate at all, but 9 to 5, 9 to 6 over the weekend, whatever. I liked coming home and having a glass of wine or a glass of beer. And like, it wasn't necessarily the alcohol that was the most captivating part of it, although I'd be completely delusional if I said it wasn't. It had nothing to do with that. It absolutely did. But a good part of it was just a way for me to de-stress. And also, I liked having something to sip on in the evening, and that action of like sipping on something and slowing down was really appealing. So what I did when I started doing experiments with removing it from, when I started doing experiments around adjusting that habit, and that has taken various forms over the last year. Currently, I'm just not drinking at all, and haven't for 2 months and won't for another 2 months or so. And then for me, what was really helpful was having a substitute. So whether that was a cup of decaf coffee when I came in the door, a cup of tea, sparkling water has worked really nicely. And I actually sometimes will drink sparkling water out of a wine glass, not because I miss the wine glass, just because it feels fancier and nicer. So yeah, having an alternative thing to go to. I know that a lot of people who give up like beer, drinking beer, the alcoholic beer, will go to a non-alcoholic form because they still like the taste, they still like that thing that occupies their time, but they just don't want the alcohol anymore. And so they go to non-alcoholic beer. My father did that for years. And like, it's a good substitute. So have a substitute for the habit that you're trying to break. All right? So now we're going to dive into time management. So time management is intricately linked to habit formation, right? So we have to, when we're trying to develop new behaviors, especially if we're trying to carve out time for a new behavior, a new habit that didn't exist before, time management is an important part of that. So the skills around time management are actually habits in of themselves. So keep in mind that if this is an area that you really struggle with, habit formation, time management, self-discipline, before you dive into trying to tackle new habits, especially if they're kind of more stretch habits, like exercising when you haven't been, or daily meditation or something like that, you might need to work first on your habits around time management and self-discipline. So keep that in mind, that you might have some foundational things to work on first before you can really effectively expect yourself to be building functional new habits. So there are a few strategies around time management that I want to talk about. And the first is called pre-commitment. So pre-commitment is 1 part time management and 1 part trigger. It's committing ahead of time to getting really specific on what you want to do, when and how you want to do it. So you detail when, where, and how, in addition to what you will be doing at a specific time. So for example, you want to exercise more. Okay, so you have to be, in order to set some pre-commitments around that, you want to say what you're going to be doing for that physical activity, whether it's taking a 15-minute walk after dinner Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay, so 15 minutes is a quantifiable amount. It's also achievable and manageable for most people. When you're doing it after dinner on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? So it's super specific. And then where. Okay, so maybe it's around your neighborhood. Maybe it's, if you live in a really cold climate, maybe it's going to a recreation center and walking around a track or on a treadmill for a while. But being very specific about where you're going to do that thing. When we establish a pre-commitment, it's dramatically more effective than if you just vaguely say you're going to do something, okay, without the details. So there's been some research around this related to exercise and people who say they're going to exercise. And the people who just vaguely said, I'm going to increase my physical activity, only did that with a 30% success rate, right? So 30% of them were actually successful in increasing their physical activity. Whereas when the researchers got these individuals to pre-commit, to determine when, where, how, and what they were going to be doing, 90% of them were successful in increasing their physical activity. Be aware that what that's not saying is they were 100% successful with their new goals around physical activity, but they were successful 90% were successful in increasing their physical activity, okay? So keep that in mind, that just because you do a pre-commitment and have these things delineated doesn't mean that you're going to be able to hit that nail on the head every single time, right? And what's important is you come back to it. Okay, so you still have that pre-commitment. You still have that commitment to doing that thing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever. But if you miss a Friday, just double down and make sure that you go on Monday. Okay, so it's not an all or nothing. But that pre-commitment can be really powerful. And then if you couple pre-commitment with scheduling, so physically putting something on a calendar or a calendar, right? So a digital calendar, a printed calendar, whatever your sort of scheduling mode is, will suffice. But actually putting it into your schedule will also increase the likelihood that it happens. So there are different attitudes toward scheduling and time management, productivity. Some people say you should schedule out your whole day, like in 15 or 30-minute increments. Others go the route of, scheduling certain things into your day, like absolute commitments. For example, I schedule in doing video sessions, or when we're doing our one-on-ones, those absolutely get scheduled. Those go into my calendar. They go into your calendars. But I'm not one of those people that likes scheduling out every minute of my day. I value some flexibility, but I also recognize that those unscheduled times can be nebulous and less productive than the times when I do schedule stuff out. So when my list of things that I need to accomplish in a given day or a given week or a given month is long and intense, I get more intense about my scheduling, and I block it out by whatever increments need to happen in order to get those things done. Okay. I love the idea. There's two ideas that I really love around the concept of time management. In order to have our priorities be our priorities, we need to carve out time in our days for them to actually happen. Okay, we're not just going to magically find the time to exercise, for example. I need to move on from the exercise example, but whatever. For now, we'll stick with exercise. You're not just going to magically discover a half an hour or an hour several days a week that you can go and exercise, right? You have to carve it out. You have to make it part of your daily, your weekly routine, okay? The other concept that I really love is that it dovetails with the priorities thing. like making time for your priorities. So amateurs do things when they're easy and when they're convenient, and professionals do things on a schedule. Okay? So a little bit of tough love for myself. This is why I love that, is like, yeah, if you're wanting to be truly effective at something, if you want to be a professional at a particular thing, if you want your proficiency to be really high, do it on a schedule. Okay? There's a couple techniques for scheduling and time management that I really like. So one of them is called like ranked prioritization. And some people call this like a plan of the day. It's basically where you spend a few minutes either at the start of a day or the start of a week. They work really well if you do them in tandem, like you do 5 minutes of planning for the week, and then each day you kind of further refine the plan. But spend a few minutes once a week, and then a few minutes at the start of each day, and identify your priorities for that week, and then subsequently for each day. And put them in rank of order of importance. So the most important, the most urgent thing, the biggest priority of that day gets put at the top. And you then do number 2, number 3, number 4. The list can be however long you want it to be. Keep in mind that the longer that list is for each day, like generally speaking, the harder it is to actually like get through all of those items. So the more that you can kind of spread them out throughout a week and get effective at assessing their priority, the easier it is to truly like get through the list of things that you want to accomplish. So you just check those priorities off as you go throughout your day. If there are things remaining on your list at the end of the day that didn't get done, those go to the top of the list the next day, which is why it's kind of nice to have the rough outline of a weekly plan so that you don't just stack every single one of the tasks that you want to get done that week into one day, and then they just kind of like get funneled as the days progress. But you can do it either way, truly. So as you progress through the week, you basically just keep reshuffling, redeveloping, identifying your priorities and putting them in the appropriate ranking, and your day gets determined by that. So I actually do a combination of things, right? Like I will schedule a good chunk of my day, and the things that get scheduled are truly my priorities, right? They're things that generate income for me. I mean, talking frankly, right? Like doing video work, doing one-on-one client sessions. Those are things that generate income, and those are going to be they're either going to be at the top of my priority list, or they will be my priority every day. And then when I've accomplished those things, then I can move on to other things like exercise, like cooking, like blogging, like recipe development, like time with my family. Not that that's necessarily in order, but that just gives you an example of the things I tend to schedule. And then the ranked prioritization I use for things that aren't necessarily going to fall into that scheduled time. So that might be, some bookkeeping for my business. That might be doing some stuff like admin sort of work for our household. I don't want to call it that, but just figuring out some logistics around soccer or gymnastics or something, for Ella, or trips for our family, right? Like purchasing flights, because I'm commuting back and forth between here and Los Angeles. So there are a number of like day-to-day sort of tasks that I do the ranked prioritization for. So those get put into those times that aren't scheduled on my calendar. Another technique that I use, especially when I'm doing work that's not video-based or client-based, but like when I'm blogging, when I'm writing, when I'm working on idea generation, iterations, I'll do something called the Pomodoro technique. So the Pomodoro technique is essentially interval work training. It facilitates concentration and flow states. And what it is it's periods of very intense focus followed by a short break. And then periods of intense focus and concentration followed by a short break. And you basically just repeat that process over and over until you accomplish what it is you need to accomplish for that day. The original framework of the Pomodoro technique is a 25-minute distraction-free focused work period where you have a specific task that you want to get done. Okay, so maybe it's clearing out your email inbox, and that you give 25 minutes for that, or maybe it's a chunk of 5 emails, right? So it totally depends on what exactly your tasks look like, but giving a defined period of time to accomplish that task. Sometimes for me, I'll use either a 25-minute Pomodoro. Sometimes I'll use a 25-minute Pomodoro for posting a recipe. Like if I already have a recipe developed and I have a photo for it, what I just need to do is get it into a blog post form. I'll do a 25-minute Pomodoro for that. Or I'll do a 25-minute Pomodoro for a rough draft of a blog post. And then I'll take a little break and I'll come back to it and I'll go through and refine it for 25 minutes. And then I'll take a break and I'll come back and I'll start editing, like spell check and punctuation editing and stuff like that. So the Pomodoro technique can be super, super effective for increasing your ability to focus because you, by definition, are eliminating your distractions. You're turning off your phone, you don't have open tabs on your browsers, you're not jumping back and forth between email and writing and phone calls or whatever. You're focusing exclusively on one task, and it turns out that the quality of your product at the end is much better. And most people find that, especially after a few attempts at this, they get quality results, and it's easier to be more productive. You get more done. It's at a higher quality, and it feels really good to have that focused intensity in your day. It's good for our brains. To facilitate the Pomodoro technique, I use a tool called Brain FM. I'll link to that in the weekly notes. But Brain FM is essentially an app that has themed music that helps you focus. It will facilitate meditation or sleep or states of calm. And the reason I like using that particular app is it has a timer on it. So you can set the timer for 30 minutes. And so my Pomodoros, instead of being 25 minutes, are actually pretty typically a half an hour, because that's the length of time I can get with Brain FM. But so I'll sync it for the focus music. I'll put in my earbuds and I'll listen to this music that's designed to get you into a flow state quickly. And then I will work intensely for that 30 minutes. And then when the music shuts off, I know it's time to take a 5-minute break. So the Pomodoro technique, if you don't use something like Brain FM, you're supposed to use a timer. And the original iteration of it is you use a timer that actually has it ticking to it, so that just like with the music, you have an auditory cue that it's time to focus. So you start associating that ticking with intense periods of productivity, and that helps make it easier to switch into that mode. Yeah. those are kind of the essential pieces of the Pomodoro technique, but it's a super effective way of starting to better manage your time. And I actually started using that in my office work when I wasn't doing minimal wellness, and it was really effective there. I found that it reduced stress, it reduced like anxiety over like multiple projects going at once, because I would focus and then stop and then focus and then stop. And I got a lot more done, and it was of higher quality. And it felt better at the end of the day when I was able to do even just a few Pomodoros a day. Really helps to increase your feelings of productivity and your ability to manage your time. So a couple just last minute wrap up thoughts around time management. Procrastination is something that I think most of us struggle with, at least to one extent or another. And procrastination usually results from like the desire to avoid or delay unpleasant tasks. So to begin breaking down procrastination tendencies, you have to recognize and assess why you're procrastinating, right? So you have to engage with the procrastination and try to figure out why you're doing it, what you're trying to avoid, and what you do to avoid it. Okay, so both of those pieces are important. And then take corrective action. So you're not going to stop procrastinating without stopping procrastinating. Like, you do actually have to act your way out of that behavior. But identifying why you're doing it and then helping to work your way out of it. So like one of the ways that can be really effective to help work your way out of it is that you figure out what it is you're avoiding, and then you commit yourself to doing that thing for 5 minutes or 2 minutes. And a lot of times when we start doing something, we find that it's really not that bad. So those tiny commitments of doing 1 minute or 2 minutes of the thing you're avoiding will actually help get you over that inertia of like avoiding it altogether. You can also set up some rewards that you can give yourself after you're done doing the task that you were kind of avoiding or procrastinating. So that can be kind of powerful for people. For me, sometimes a reward is going on a walk outside. Sometimes it's a show, like at the end of a long work day, like I'll decompress with like a TV show or something. Sometimes it's a nice dinner out. It can be any number of things. Sometimes it's a sauna. I love the sauna. So I've actually rewarded myself this week with the sauna twice. Like after those, I had a couple of very intense, long days of client sessions. And after those, I was like, I'm going to the gym. I'm going to have a workout of some kind. I didn't make it a punishing one, but because I'd been sitting all day, it felt good to move my body. And then the reward was 20 minutes in the sauna at the end of it, and felt really good. And then in terms of procrastination, clarifying the negative consequences of not doing that particular task. So whether that's not doing well on an exam, or having a group of team members at work let down because you didn't do your component or didn't do it well. There's lots of negative consequences for things. But be clear on what those negative consequences for procrastinating on that activity or that action actually are, and that can help get you a little bit of extra motivation to begin. So especially if you couple like several of these things, right? Like if you couple getting really clear on the negative outcomes, the negative consequences of not doing it, if you establish some sort of reward for doing it, and then also just take it in a small chunk at first, that oftentimes helps us break that cycle. Eliminating distractions. So I mentioned this during the Pomodoro technique, but it's essential for just time management in general. Like, turn off notifications on your phone, don't use social media or the internet or auxiliary pieces of the internet during work periods. Schedule time for email. So I know that a lot of us can get really bogged down or distracted by email. Schedule periods of time during your day to handle emails. And if your expectation in your work environment or your home environment, whatever, is that you immediately respond to emails, maybe that includes setting some new expectations. Like, hey, I will absolutely respond to your email in a timely manner, but it will be within the course of a day or the course of, 2 days. And maybe it's you check email at 8 a.m. when you get into your office or when you begin your workday. Maybe it's then checking it again around the noon hour and checking it again before you leave for work or before you leave for home for the day or close down your workstation or whatever. But it can be that you check your email several times a day and attend to those emails that come in and need your attention. You can do that several times a day, but don't let it just take over your day, right? Like, don't become an email responding machine because it destroys your ability to do other things. All right. So then finally, like in terms of time management, just periodically monitor, assess, adjust and realign your strategies according to your priorities. Okay. And then I mentioned one of the tools that I use really frequently for time management, which was Brain FM. 3 other tools that I use a lot are my calendar. So I use Apple products, an Apple computer, an Apple phone. And I use the calendar that's on those products, and they sync to each other. So I make an adjustment in a calendar on my phone, and it automatically adjusts on my laptop. That's really, really handy. Or back in my traditional working world, I had an Outlook calendar that I took the extra steps of syncing to my phone so that I could see what was coming for the next few days when I wasn't at work, and make any necessary adjustments, or just know what was going on when I was at home, and vice versa. Like, I could also make adjustments to evening activities or morning activities or weekend activities when I was at work. So it was really nice to just have one calendar that synced and held all of my information. I also use iNote, so it's a notepad function on Apple products. There's similar things for Android products, but it's essentially like a notepad, right? And I use that for shopping lists. I use it for daily prioritized planning. I use it for reminders. Josh and I actually keep our values and priorities lists on iNotes. I do iNotes where I use them for drafts of blog posts or idea iterations. And you can share them with other people, which is how Josh and I use it for our value stuff and other things. But that iNote is really, really helpful especially for time management things like grocery shopping and daily planning, those types of functions. And then finally, there's an app called Productive. And Productive can be really beneficial, especially when you're trying to establish new habits. You can enter in any number of things you want to do in your day. You can schedule them out. It doesn't let you schedule them for exact time frames, but it lets you schedule them for morning, midday, evening, and then any number of configurations for your week. So you can do it once a week on Mondays. You can do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can only do it on the weekends. It's really customizable, and it's a great way to start entrenching some of those new habits that you're trying to work on. I've used it a ton for that exact purpose, which is really nice. So I will include all of the links to the information, the resources that I mentioned during this video in the weekly wrap-up. All right, have a great day, everybody.